Now we have some awards to give out, as I do every year. Last year, I had an overall Wrestler of the Year honor, and then I broke it down by male and female categories. I'm not doing that this year. This year, I'm sticking to one single Wrestler of the Year winner. Last year, it was Bryan Danielson. 5 of the 15 spots on my Match of the Year list were occupied by Bryan Danielson. But what sealed it for me was the fact that he went from headlining WrestleMania and challenging for the WWE Championship or the Universal title, whatever it was. I think it was the Universal title. But he went from challenging for the top title in the company. And in the second half of last year, he did the exact same thing in AEW. And he was doing it at a level higher than he has maybe ever in his career. And he's had a long career. So that was impressive. To me, that makes you the Wrestler of the Year when you can pull that off. This year, there were 3 names that I was seriously considering for the award. Will Ospreay was one of those names because Ospreay in ring has had an incredible year. Better than anybody else. 4 of the 15 spots on this year's list are occupied by Will Ospreay, including the best match at Wrestle Kingdom, the best match at Forbidden Door, and the best matches in this year's G1. And if the emphasis is on in-ring work, it's hard to vote against Will Ospreay. Dax Harwood made a good case. He has had a career year for himself, not only with the Briscoes trilogy, but his Dynamite matches against the Young Bucks, against the Acclaimed. And he has had singles matches this year with CM Punk, with Cash Wheeler, with Adam Cole, with Jay Lethal, with Bryan Danielson, with Will Ospreay. The Ospreay match, not surprisingly, being the best of all the singles matches that Dax had this year. IWGP Tag Team Champion, AAA Tag Team Champion, former Ring of Honor Tag Team Champion. He held all but the AEW Tag Team titles this year. As great as his in-ring resume has been, and as great of a year as Ospreay has had. And if this was a kayfabe list, then Roman Reigns would be the runaway Wrestler of the Year. But this is not a kayfabe list. And Roman Reigns has worked a grand total of 7 singles matches on TV or pay-per-view all year. So I cannot rank him as the Wrestler of the Year. My Wrestler of the Year for 2022 is also this year's MVP for All Elite Wrestling. And that is Jon Moxley. Now, I don't have any set criteria for judging Wrestler of the Year. A lot of times it has to do with a person's body of work in the ring. I will note that Jon Moxley only appears once in my top 15 matches of the year, and that was for Anarchy in the Arena, which was an ensemble cast that they had. It included 9 other people. It's not about any one match this year. It's about the overall year that this man has had and how important he was to Tony Khan and the second biggest wrestling company in the world. This was the year that Jon Moxley planted his flag in the ground with AEW and he signed a brand new 5-year contract to show where his loyalty lies. This man bleeds AEW. Literally, he bleeds all the time, everywhere. Moxley left rehab and he made his return to television on January 19th. He was looking healthier and leaner than he has been in years. And in the promo he cut that night, he said that in 2022, he was going to grab the world of pro wrestling by the balls and do what he wants. And he lived up to his word. He has been a weekly staple on television. And it doesn't matter if it's big names like his match with Bryan Danielson at Revolution, or Quake by the Lake against Chris Jericho, or his all-out match with CM Punk, or Full Gear against MJF. Or the countless TV matches that he has had with names that are not as big, like Wheeler Yuta and Daniel Garcia and Brody King and Darius Martin, or Konosuke Takeshita on Rampage. And that was a hell of a match that those two had, even better than their first. He showed up, and he put the work in. There was no name too big or too small for Jon Moxley to work with. That is to say nothing of all the matches that he had on the indies this year, whether it was as GCW champion against Nick Gage, ripping his body to shreds, or wrestling men like Biff Busick or Speedball Mike Bailey. I mean, he tore it up all over the place this year. In multiple promotions for New Japan, against Will Ospreay and El Desperado and Juice Robinson. When CM Punk broke his foot and Tony Khan needed an interim AEW World Champion to step in, who did he turn to save his main event for Forbidden Door? he turned to Jon Moxley, who beat Hiroshi Tanahashi to become the AEW World Champion again. And he didn't stop. He was part of that Blood and Guts match. He defended the title against Rush at Fight for the Fallen. And then when CM Punk came back, he beat Punk in 3 minutes, which set up their rematch at All Out, where Moxley did the job to get the belt back onto CM Punk. And he was supposed to go on vacation after that. I think he was going to go ice fishing with some friends. He was going to go on vacation until Muffin Man blew up at the media scrum and the Elite decided to confront him about it. 4 of the top stars in the company, all of whom had just won titles that night, had them stripped away. And again, Tony Khan was left to call upon who else but Jon Moxley to save the day, like Mighty Mouse. Mighty Mox. We're going to start calling him Mighty Mox. So Moxley ended up with the AEW World title yet again. Had a great match with Bryan Danielson at Grand Slam. Defended the title on Dynamite against Hangman Page and Penta. And then he did the honors for MJF at Full Gear. This is a man who stepped up when AEW needed him, not only in the ring, but behind the scenes as well, during probably the most chaotic period in the history of the company. They needed someone like Moxley. They needed a steady hand. And Tony Khan was very fortunate to have him. That is why Jon Moxley is the Wrestler of the Year for 2022. Tag Team of the Year honors go to FTR. Holding multiple tag team titles across different promotions, they owned the top spot for Match of the Year with the Briscoes for all 3 of their Ring of Honor matches. Their rematch with the Bucks, their match with the Acclaimed a few weeks ago, the match they had with Aussie Open that I heard so much about from the Royal Quest show. They were handpicked to be Ricky Steamboat's partners in his return match last month. They have had the best year of their careers. Maybe the best that they will ever have. I wouldn't say to them, hey, you guys have peaked. But it's possible we look back and say this is the year that FTR peaked. Hopefully not. Hopefully they have an even better year next year. Now they're gearing up to defend their IWGP Tag Team belts at the Tokyo Dome for the first time. But the babyface run that they have been on and how the fans have taken to them has been so much fun to watch. And if FTR is the Tag Team of the Year, then the Briscoes deserve an honorable mention for the year that they've had. They were part of those same 3 matches with FTR for the ROH Tag Team titles. They also had a banger with Aussie Open at the House of Glory show in October. And a lot of other great matches in HOG as well that I know a lot of people didn't see, but I did. I was ringside for those matches against teams like United Empire and Main Event, who just beat the Briscoes for the House of Glory tag team titles. I got to see those matches up close, and they were great. And you could even take it back to the start of the year and them winning this year's NWA Crockett Cup. The Briscoes have had a hell of a run this year too, which is worth mentioning. There were some great pay-per-views this year. I thought WrestleMania was a lot of fun. This was probably the best WrestleMania, honestly, since 31. Clash at the Castle. Another very good show. Full Gear was one of the best AEW shows that they've done. But there was no better wrestling pay-per-view this year than Forbidden Door in June. I had been waiting for an AEW New Japan Super Show since this company was first formed, and there were politics that didn't allow for it to happen until now. CM Punk's injury threw a wrench into things, but what we ended up with was a card that did not have a single bad match on the entire show. We had FTR winning the IWGP Tag Team titles, an excellent 4-way for the All-Atlantic Championship with Pac winning the title, Will Ospreay and Orange Cassidy, they stole the show, and the Shibata cameo after was tremendous. Getting to see Sting as tag team partners with Shingo Takagi, that was a trip. Thunder Rosa and Tony Storm, they had a good match. Claudio debuting as the replacement for Bryan Danielson against Zack Sabre Jr. was the perfect choice. Tony Khan wasn't planning on debuting him until the ROH pay-per-view in July. But injuries really wreaked havoc on this card, so he had to readjust. And that may be the most impressive thing about this show, is how badly they were plagued by injuries, and yet they still turned out the best show all year. The IWGP title 4-way was very good until the finish, and the injury to Adam Cole. And then Moxley beating Tanahashi in the main event. He finally got the match he wanted for years with Tanahashi. This was a show where they did not even have CM Punk, they did not have Bryan Danielson, and they did not have Kenny Omega. Imagine if they did. This year, we should have Danielson and Omega in the mix. And hopefully we get Okada against one of them. But for all the great pay-per-views that we got, there was some stinkers. And the worst of them all in 2022, I'm sorry to say, was the Royal Rumble. And that sucks because I love the Royal Rumble, and I'm hoping that Triple H is extra motivated to make his first Royal Rumble as the head of creative next month a fun one. But the men's Royal Rumble match this year was one of the most boring matches that I have ever seen. The Brock Lesnar-Bobby Lashley match, that's a match I waited a long time for. That ended up being a disappointment. The Roman Reigns-Seth Rollins match was very good. That was the only really good thing on the entire show. And I love Rollins playing mind games with Roman by resurrecting the old Shield entrance out of the crowd. But overall, this was the most disappointing event of the year for me. Rookie of the Year. I don't always do Rookie of the Year, but I thought it was appropriate to give out a Rookie of the Year award this year. And really, Rookie of the Year comes down to just two people. Braun Breaker or Logan Paul. I was tempted to go with Logan Paul, but I ended up going with Braun Breaker. Even though he debuted on NXT last year, this was his first full year on TV and his first full year as the top star of basically his own brand. And he has improved a lot from where he was on day one. Logan Paul has been a revelation since WrestleMania when he tagged with The Miz against the Mysterios. Then he wrestled Miz at SummerSlam one-on-one, and he impressed me even more. Then he got thrown to the Lions with Roman Reigns for the championship in Saudi Arabia, and they hit a grand slam. If he commits to this, Logan Paul could be a future world champion. Braun Breaker already is a champion. He will absolutely be a future world champion. There is no if. Braun Breaker will be a world champion on Raw or SmackDown one day. Logan Paul has wrestled all of 3 matches, which is only one less than Miro has had all year. Think about that. But he's wrestled 3 matches this year, and that's his entire career portfolio, are the 3 matches he had this year. Braun Breaker has been wrestling every single week. He's been putting the work in. He's been getting better. I like the vignettes they did with him leading up to the match with Apollo Crews, so I think his character work has gotten better as well. But he's there every week, having good matches. And Logan Paul needs more than 3 matches that I'm sure he rehearsed for weeks in advance to qualify over Braun as the Rookie of the Year. But I would put Logan at number 2. Hook may have ended up on my list. I wouldn't have put Hook at number 1, but Hook could have been a solid number 2. Maybe he is number 3. But the booking with Hook, he got hot and then he disappeared. He was hot for a minute and the fans still like him, but he kind of vanished there for a while. So I couldn't really seriously consider him for the number 1 spot on this list. But to me, it comes down to either Braun or Logan Paul. And like I said, I would go with Braun Breaker. Now, as far as most improved this year, that would go to Tiffany Stratton, before she got hurt. Literally had her first match 13 months ago, and you could see the improvement in her just from the first half of this year to where she was in the summer. And if she can get better that quickly, imagine how good she can be a few years from now.